Hello, and welcome to the second episode of Make It Experiential. This is the podcast by We Are XI, where we cover all upcoming cultural moments and how we can make them even more unforgettable and exciting to the fans, guests, consumers who go and take part. My name is Franco Boydell. I'm the Head of Client Services for XI. I've got around a decade of experience working particularly with consumer-facing electronics brands as well as retail, and I've been part of the RUF group for about 3 years. I'm joined by my colleague Andy.
Hello, yes. I've got my 5-year experiential badge, past that. But I've got 20 years commercial design experience, like from photography, UI design, motion graphics, and more recently sort of AI experimentation.
And today we are joined by Andy Dougan, who has oodles of experiential experience working with some of the best agencies in the UK. I will do a terrible job of outlining some of your, greatest moments. So I'll pass over to you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm the honorary veteran player, as you would say, of the experiential sector. I've worked for independent, large holding groups, mainly focused in the events and experiential sector for around 20 years now, running a couple of agencies and then sort of looking after global brands. And I now sort of mentor and advise within the business. Co-founder of a couple of little tech platforms as well along the way. But it's an absolute pleasure to be here. I mean, Franco, as you know, we talk a lot about this, really passionate about the experiential sector. Love a bit of emerging tech and huge fan of sports. So it's all three of it. This isn't like work. This is a busman's holiday for me. So pleasure to be here.
Great. Yes, perfect storm of your key interest today. So.
Yeah.
And of course, the principle of this podcast is looking ahead to the next 3, 6, 12 months of cultural activity. And we've got the usual list of kind of sporting events coming up, just at the start of 2025, those being the NFL, the Six Nations. But of course, next year we are also hosting the Women's Rugby World Cup here in England, which is going to have a huge amount of energy behind, and we're really, really excited to see how much of a bang that can have.
Yeah.
But rugby is probably our comfort zone, as you can tell by the 3 rugby jerseys that we're wearing. So perhaps we start off by talking about American football. And the last time we met up, you were explaining what had happened over in Cannes during the advertising festival.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think it came up because you were saying, a lot of people are so fixated with the halftime show that probably can't even remember who the teams are, let alone who won. And I was like, well, actually, I do remember who won because sports has been, the reason we're talking about it today is it's the agenda around sports and experiential has been rising, and brands have seen all the potential around sports to engage communities and deliver value to their fans and customers. So sports has increasingly become higher on the agenda at Cannes over the last few years. And this year, we'll probably, for the second year in a row, the number one location to go to in Cannes, outside of the awards festival, was the Stagwell Sports Beach. And every year they bring people from the world of football, NFL, and this year their keynote speakers were the Kelsey brothers, and they were there en masse with the Kansas City Chiefs, who went on to win, who were the Super Bowl winners. And it was really interesting, talking about how brands are connected now with sports, because in one way it's coming from the brands to the sports, but actually the player pathways that they develop and going through into their careers and through their careers, they're taught very early on the power of the brands and the potential and what it brings in terms of value to the sports. And I got chatting to Justin Reed, who's one of their star sort of players. And I was chatting to him, and I was like, so are you staying out tonight? He says, no, I've got to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I was thinking, is he going to some kind of party? He said, no, we're driving straight from here up to Hamburg because the Kansas City Chiefs have got a massive fan base in Germany. And he was about to open some bars up in Hamburg. And he was going to tour of Germany after that to open up 3 more bars. And these players, just their awareness of the value of brands, not just in terms of naming rights, but what they bring to them and the potential in terms of developing their own career and their post-career is phenomenal.
It's that kind of almost trifecta of sporting club brand.
Yeah.
Then you've got your player brand, and then also the actual consumer brand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then you've got the super machine kind of working for you.
You have.
Michael Jordan, Nike, and the Chicago Bulls kind
Yeah.
of in full force.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it's funny with this year's Super Bowl, the amount of kind of publicity that came around it, simply due to the kind of the Taylor Swift effect.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing a post of what's she called, the kind of British supermodel who was wearing a T-shirt that said kind of weird flex to have a football game at a Beyonce show, but okay. And to see the power that had kind of brought in.
Yes.
The whole super celebrity set, all kind of flocking in really for this main event.
There has, but it's I think we were talking about this the other day. It's had a mixed impact. There's a lot of people. It's brought a lot of new fans to it, which is fantastic, and that's what this is about. It's about growing communities and growing the size of the sport. But there's also a few people that have just questioned it.
There was those stats that we looked at.
Yeah, I've got them here. I was just about to mention that. There's like 17% people are more interested in football, American football now because of Taylor Swift. But then equally, I think there's like 17% of people that now hate American football more.
It's like a bell curve. You're kind of you're just an revolving door of new fans in, old guard out.
And 14% will spend more on football because of this as well, which is
really interesting.
Yeah.
Swiftonomics.
Swiftonomics. No.
But I think that a bit like the new face of rugby that we're seeing at the moment, and also like the 100 doing with the cricket. All these big sporting bodies need to find ways into a new audience.
Yes.
It can't just be men drinking pints and that sort of thing. Kind of there's an untapped market for them, which is families. It is a different demographic altogether.
Yeah. No, I mean it's really interesting, and some of the activations that we're beginning to see have been really inspiring. I mean, one thing that Z specialise in obviously is the technology, applying technology to either enrich or extend an experience. And last year, Microsoft did one that really captured my attention, which was their next gen stats, which was an AR overlay. And the reason I mention that is I've not seen that over here yet. I've not seen it outside of the US and outside of NFL, which is, and I don't understand why we haven't yet. It's a huge area of untapped potential because we've got the data. All players now, whatever sport, whether it be NFL, whether it be rugby, and we'll come on to that, or football, whatever, they've all got player devices, for health monitoring, performance. There's no reason at all why we shouldn't be able to take that in so that people can see real-time data through augmented reality. And both application of that for fans in the stadium, but also at home, whether you're in the third space in a bar, you should be able to point it at the screen and see the data.
So Amazon do through kind of AWS also do a Thursday night football. So it's not Super Bowl, but it's in the same sphere where they basically publicise these stats. And I haven't seen this live in action, but I do wonder if the breaks in play may help with some sort of kind of updated data.
Yeah,
you think about Rugby World Cup last year when the Ireland and New Zealand teams were in the final 5 minutes, and there was 32 plays back to back, no break in activity at all, and you think with all of that happening, what sort of stats are you going to be getting out? Are they going to be they're going to be exciting one way or another, but it's just going to be a kind of onslaught of impact, calories burned, no distance covered, very low, just between the kind of 5 metre line and the end. But yeah, I think to the consumer at home, it's such a great way to be able to feel closer to the individuals, but the environment. But that should have some level of kind of space, particularly within a kind of hospitality setting. Where you might not be kind of rubbing shoulders with people standing up and that sort of thing. But in terms of the new demographics that this is kind of opening up to. One of the examples we were speaking about before was the kind of Michael Cera V, which I wouldn't see as a typical American football sponsor, being a kind of softer, kind of beauty cream brand?
Yeah. But that was interesting because normally, if Apple, they're going to do an advert and that you get some kind of sneaky thing of like what they're building up to. Whereas I think CeraVe, they saw like a post on Reddit, like it's like 7 years old, where someone was just joking that Michael Cera had like invented this skincare cream thing. And they thought, well, let's run with this, get the actor Michael Cera involved, and but don't tell anyone about it. Literally create a new conspiracy theory. So they were posting all of these things out there, and then obviously when the advert goes live, everyone's like, whoa, And it is like that's the thing. It's like a Gogglebox moment because you've got a stadium, and then you're just going to see that reaction from like them just
ripple around. I'd have loved to be part of the pitching process, trying to convince them. How much spend is this? You kind of got kind of junior intern saying, "I found something on Reddit. I think we can use."
But there's other revenues they're exploring. They're the only reason I know this is because I've been fascinated by the Louis Rees Zammit. His trial, his going over there, and fair dues to him. He's going for his dream. Qualified for the Kansas City Chiefs, didn't make the shortcut, but is now being picked up by the Jacksonville Jaguars. But there's various rumours about them that they are potentially looking at relocating to the UK. And where that started is, as you know, because you've been involved, the NFL will do 2 or 3 games. They're increasing it every year in the season in Wembley in the UK, and that's obviously to extend their fan base. But there's talks about them actually basing themselves permanently here.
Wow.
Which can be interesting. I don't know how that's going to work with time zone and player exhaustion. But again, it's all about, expanding the game out, growing it, reaching new communities, tapping into that fan base. So it's fascinating to see what's going on there.
It's awesome when you see the kind of weekend that everything kicks off here in the UK. It's people just appear kind of out of nowhere. Kind of everyone's wearing the kind of jerseys, and Regent Street do their whole takeover.
Yeah.
We did a really cool activation with them a few years ago that was these sort of 3D snap masks. Did you design these, I guess?
We worked on it with our 3D Jonathan Lax, and they had like it was probably the Jaguars.
Yeah, they've been over a few times,
There's a Jaguar mouth that kind of opened. So they were 3D and they were animated as well. So
but they moved based on the user's facial position.
Oh, brilliant!
Which was it's kind of great content, and people certainly looked like they were enjoying themselves along the way. But the other big reference point that anyone who works in an experiential agency would have seen is the infamous Dallas Cowboys Meet the Team.
Oh yes,
and, it was just after I joined the business, and it was like every single brief that came through had the same reference of you could choose from probably 8 players, you could choose 5, and they'd come and join you in augmented reality. How they'd done it was actually a great kind of investment piece from them, because they used the columns in the stadium so that they had the same solution, but it was actually running on like 5 different locations.
Oh, brilliant.
So that actually, the amount of consumers and fans that they'd be able to reach would have been massive. Normally you just have one thing, one unit somewhere for people to kind of queue with, whereas this, you would have seen people just kind of going through. I always like to say when I'm pitching that we took that to the next level with our 50-person Meet the Team solution for Man City plug. But yeah, I mean, since then you've kind of seen every single club brand, regardless of sport, now kind of brings this into the mix.
Yeah.
And it's one of those kind of, I guess it's an easy win. It's like a sure thing that people are going to be kind of really into it. Kind of, I guess one of my highlights that I've seen from the NFL circuit is from a company called Groove Jones, and it's like a cage that you went into, and it kind of captured you from loads of different angles, you exit, it all processes, and then it inserts you now as an avatar into a kind of an animated sequence.
Yeah.
So it's kind of gameplay design, kind of FIFA style.
I guess it's like Unreal Engine then that
Yeah.
they probably plugged it into. Yeah.
But then the concept, I guess they can go anywhere and they can set it up. They just need that kind of animated sequence, and then bang, you're in the team.
Yeah.
Did you have any other examples that you'd seen?
No, well, one thing was the real time thing, and going back to stadiums, and like you're saying about like Unreal Engine, and again, I've only seen it in America, where what they've done is they've mapped the stadium, and then because you've got like the big screens that everyone's watching at half time, they kind of like then had the mascot in AR that would then kind of, as the camera's like panning around the crowd, you'd have this mascot that's like clambering over everyone and then kind of going on top. And obviously, because before you'd think that AR has to be through someone's phone, but actually, no, it's actually like cinema now, because you can put it on the screens in the stadium.
Absolutely. It's such an area where you've got like that active audience, any concert, any festival, any sports event, everyone's looking in the same direction.
Yeah.
When you see these kind of fake out-of-home campaigns that seem to be the only thing on anyone's mind just on the other side of summer, actually it's probably not the most powerful thing in the world when it's on an individual's phone, but if you get 80,000 people having that shared moment,
Yes.
then that's really powerful.
Well, just look at this. I'm absolutely addicted to the kiss cams, which you get in the
Oh,
US.
yeah.
We don't do that over here. I don't know why, but the lookalikes are just brilliant. And all of a sudden, it's a shared moment, whether people in the stadium, but also all the content's all over TikTok. I just think we've got to see some of that over here.
And it's got that nostalgia element to it. When you see yourself up on the screen, then that's what makes everyone kind of smile and come to life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I went to a conference years ago called the Stadium Business Summit, which is like the movers and shakers of the industry kind of all in one place. And I listened to the kind of creative director from this architectural firm who seemed to do all of the stadiums in the US. And it was super inspiring, and he was talking about the new Las Vegas stadium. But one thing that really opened my eyes was the hospitality offering over there is so advanced. I think probably in part due to scale of stadiums, in part due to disposable income of some people in a continent rather than little England. But then more importantly, the actual activity that people would get to do kind of while they were there. So you've got very, very high caliber DJs who are playing during those kind of quarter breaks and that sort of thing that you just can't get here. Everyone's if you're fortunate enough to have been to some kind of corporate boxes and that sort of thing, like it's all very nice, and you're there for a jolly and you're there to kind of network. But it'll be interesting to see if, particularly with a lot of the stadiums in the stadia and the arenas in the UK changing hands, whether we're going to start to see more investment in that hospitality side.
I think so. I spent quite a lot of time in Miami. Very fortunate to go there quite a bit. And last year I went to see the Miami Dolphins, which was just an incredible experience. This year I went to watch the Miami Marlins, which is the baseball. And their VIP hospitality is on a different level. I mean, there were full-on nightclubs going on. One of the VI hospitality boxes had a swimming pool. So people are in the pool having a pool party, watching the game. It's incredible. It's fascinating. And obviously you've got the Dolby Pro Logic surround sound in there. The audio visual content around them is just unbelievable. Banks of stats, augmented reality overlay. I mean, it's I think there's some interesting things going on. I mean, we'll talk about rugby shortly. I mean, they're just obviously renaming Twickenham Stadium, which has caused a big debate. Yes. But you'd like to think with that will come some of this innovation and some of this new level of hospitality. Yeah.
Were there dolphins in the pool? Or?
No.
Not even augmented reality dolphins. God, they missed a trick. How do we think they could make the current hospitality offering at a stadium like Twickenham into this more experiential phase. And we do have a bit of a bit here that we where we make it experiential.
Okay.
Like that. Make it experiential.
Where we then have a brainstorm around a couple of ideas about how we can uplift everything.
I think an area that's relatively untapped is grassroots. I don't know, have you ever seen the film Invincible with Mark Wahlberg, which is basically about an everyday guy who everyone thinks he's great, and they suddenly hear there's some trial outs for I can't remember what team it is, but it's an NFL major team, and he goes along and he gets shortlisted and he ends up playing in the Super Bowl final, and everyone likes that sort of underdog to hero story. I think there's a reality that there's a very fine line between being good and being professional. Sometimes it's a couple of decisions early on in your life to not go to that coaching session that could have actually been the moment of magic. And through technology, we've got the potential to show people how actually competitively they could actually match up. So whether that be their speed, through speed tests and showing people, competing against shadow. There was a brilliant activation by Nike years ago, which was a running activation around a loop, and you could chase your own shadow and chase the shadows of professional athletes and try and beat them, but you saw their avatar on screen running around the track. Yeah. Brilliant. Things like that I think are really interesting. Speed, agility, reaction time, power.
Absolutely. And the beauty of being able to kind of tie that all in to one system that you would ultimately be able to have against even the home team of the stadium or something like that.
Yeah.
If you've been or haven't been to the Battersea Power Station Under Armour lab, as it were.
I haven't seen it yet. Heard lots about it.
But they've got probably 5 different kind of activations just like this, and they go out to market to find not elite athletes, but people who are really making waves in their spaces, and they all get invited along to compete in this area, and then at the end of the campaign, if you're at the top, then you all go away on this trip, and it's they really put a huge amount of emphasis on these grassroots athletes in different capacities, but the idea of being able to bring that into what is everyone's there for fun, but it links it so nicely into the team that you're there to see.
I think so, and it's really interesting because obviously technology now has so much power to do that. But I remember one that was quite low on the tech, and this is just emphasised. Sometimes it's just about the insight. Put you in the player's shoes, and it was during the 2015 World Cup, which was the men's World Cup that was here, and it was by Canterbury, and it was such a simple activation, but it was brilliant. As you approach the stadium, there were these metal frameworks above you with the shirts hanging, but they were way too high. I mean, they're like the height of this, but higher. So the only way and they just left it to people's curiosity to figure out how to get them. So what people started doing was doing their own line-outs, getting their friends to lift them up like they would do in a line-out, to grab the shirt, and it was the only way. And if you did that, you got great, a 50, £100, Canterbury shirt. That's a brilliant insight. But we can level that up even further now with technology and make it even more real. And as you say, storing that data on with one pass and be able to access that time and time again and increase your own performance. It does beg the question, is there a Britain's Got Talent style grassroots program from a brand? It'd be brilliant for a brand to say we're going to find the next NFL player of the season, or we're going to find the next academy player for a rugby team. And we're going to do that because we're going to start taking the feeds in from this, these brand activations, and start shortlisting people based on their performance. What a great opportunity for a brand to get involved in grassroots.
Absolutely. And I feel like that rugby at the moment has this real new lease of life. Yeah. And particularly in the Six Nations, if you look at the young age of some of the guys coming through on the men's side, it is incredible. On the women's side as well, some of the players are super young.
Yeah.
And it's an area that's just ripe to. It needs a lot of kind of watering to help kind of grow into where it is. But ultimately brands have a huge opportunity to be that kind of force for good, and give people a huge amount of entertainment and capture a huge amount of kind of audience share along the way. The solutions that we've done at Twickenham are a kind of, I guess, testament to that. I think the British Airways Rugby Challenge, we've rolled out, this will be the kind of 7th or 8th tournament.
Wow.
So the fact that it keeps the fans coming back kind of every single year. What is really amusing is that it's kind of a series of lit up rings that are probably about 4 meters away from the kind of line in which you need to be passing the ball through. From a distance, most people back themselves that they'd be able to get all of them through the holes. Whereas when you're kind of actually there, it's actually far more difficult. And the people who normally win are typically 17-year-old guys who are probably playing 6 times a week. People who are actually in it.
Yeah.
But when everyone's having a load of beers, the energy and the atmosphere is really unparalleled. And this November, when we're there all 4 weekends again, it's going to be super.
Yeah.
And none of us seem to get any better at doing it, even though we have to test out the sensors and it's all working. But I do find it really stressful when it's just the balls that are rolling back at you, and then you've got to get it over there.
It's visible from a distance, and everyone kind of knows what they're meant to do, and that's, to me, it's like tick. This is going to be super successful. And it will be interesting with the Women's World Cup. And you were saying, the campaign has, kicked off now.
They've just announced it. They've started it a year early, and someone's like saying, usually most World Cup campaigns are about 6 months out. And they've just said, look, there's been so much growth and so much untapped potential with the growth around women's rugby that they wanted to start it early. But what they're doing is they're gently starting it, and then they will peak it at points like when tickets are released and various bits and pieces. So it's a really smart strategy. I mean, women's rugby globally has grown. I think the global playing membership has gone up in 2 years by 33%.
Wow.
That's active players, and then people that have experienced it has grown by 50%. And it's not just about the playing community. I think England, France, and the Six Nations last year, 60,000 people at Twickenham.
Wow.
Which is nearly at full capacity. I mean, Twickenham's 80%, but still 3/4 full. And it's the same at club level. I mean, it's grassroots through to club, through to international. The growth of the game has been phenomenal.
My friend's sister plays for the Roses, but also the Harlequins, and we went along to watch the big match.
Right, yeah.
And it was the first time my wife had ever been to Twickenham, and the first ever professional rugby match. Now, they did the women's game first and then the men's game afterwards.
Yeah.
And between those two moments, they had Faithless kind of wheeled on to do a set.
Yeah.
And she kind of looked at me and, this is amazing. Do they always do this? And I said, no. I've never ever seen them do a set or anyone perform between matches like this. But, we were talking about the other day about how could we better that? And producer Caitlin plays rugby, so you've got big vested interest. But we were saying that why would you not swap the games around so that actually you've then brought the active audience there and kind of making the most of that kind of fandom through for the women's team.
I think it would be hugely beneficial because actually watching the game as a fan, and I've been having about rugby since I was a toddler. I find watching women's rugby is more liberating. There's a lot more skill. It's faster. It's slicker in terms of the ball play. Because the men's game, it's very powerful, big collisions, and you've still got speedsters in there, but there's a lot of stoppages as well because there's so much parity, and it's not necessarily always about there's skills in play, but there's certainly a lot more about moving the ball and taking advantage of people's skillfulness. In the women's rugby, so it's actually a really good game to watch. There's less stoppage time compared to the men's game.
For sure.
It's going to be interesting. And sorry, Caitlin, it's going to be really interesting because England Roses are number one in the world.
Yeah.
So, to be number one in the world and hosting it, I think there's going to be a lot of momentum around that. Yeah.
Producer Caitlin being Irish, wearing her battered Irish jersey behind the decks.
Sorry, producer Caitlin.
I saw that HSBC are a key partner.
Yeah, I mean they've been doing some really interesting during key rugby tournaments last year, because obviously it's still in a growth stage and nurturing. So brands are recognising that and actually doing some really good things around diversity, about inclusivity. HSBC have been doing the Future of Women's Rugby podcast series, but they have interactive kiosks at the key grounds, and they're inviting people to come in, talk about how they would make it more inclusive, what they think the future of women's rugby is going to be. So they're really trying to tap into this emerging fan base and communities and mobilise them around it, which is really exciting to see. And I think that's going to serve is just to help stimulate growth even further. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, Andy Dougan, thank you ever so much for joining us today. It's been
Pleasure.
a really, really nice conversation, which I've enjoyed a lot.
Likewise. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much to all of our listeners. And don't forget to tune in next month when we'll be looking at a cultural moment that will be happening more around the springtime. Just to give you a kind of sneak peek there.
Probably won't be Easter.
And it won't be Easter. it'll be a more sporting and active front. Thank you very much.